Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Study Sesh. I'm Camilla, and along with some fabulous experts from Boston City campus, we're here to turn theory into practice for you. Every sesh, we take an idea, maybe it's from a lecture or from a textbook, and we look at what it means in real life. In other words, how what you're learning in class can actually help you get ahead in your career one day. And today we're going to get stuck into something that's absolutely critical, and I do mean critical, to any business, to any brand, to any personal project even. And the thing to remember here is no matter what you're doing in the world of business, no matter what you are trying to achieve, you've got to understand and you've got to be able to define the identity of your organization or your brand. It's all about understanding what makes you stand out and what makes people actually want to connect with you. So whether you're a radio station or, a sports non-profit, even if you're just a personal brand, if you don't know who you are, no one else is going to know either. Now, with me today is Sharita van der Berg. She's an expert on how to find and own your identity in the business space. Sharita, welcome back to the sesh.
Thank you, Camilla.
Okay, so let's get into it. Let's jump straight in. In simple terms, start us off. How would you explain what organizational identity is and why it matters a whole bunch in the world of business?
So, organizational identity means understanding your identity, whether it's a personal identity or, like you said, in an organization. And this has different facets to it. It means understanding your core values, first and foremost, especially with today's Gen Zs and Gen Alphas. So you have to understand your values. You need to understand your influences. You need to understand the challenges of your station. So in essence, a SWOT analysis will break it down very well as at the end of the day, because what it also comes down to is what motivates the people who are interested in your brand, whether it be a radio station or, like you said, a sports non-profit organization or whatever. Because we're all human beings have certain things that we want, certain motivators, right? And the two that come up most often is uncertainty and belonging. So is your organization giving your listeners, the people that work for you, your consumers, what they want at the end of the day? Or am I able to trust your brand? So is your identity so clear that I know exactly what your brand is, so that I can sum up your brand in one sentence, for instance? Because if I can do that, you will get my trust and my loyalty more often than not. Also, people don't have time. We don't have time anymore. So if you don't know what your identity is, what you stand for, what you want to do from a social point of view, from an economical point of view, then guess what? No one else will either.
Shreek, this makes me think of this old marketing adage that if you're trying to talk to everyone, you end up talking to no one at all. Do you think the same is true
100%.
for your own organization's identity? So, for instance, if you're trying to talk as everyone, you're actually talking as no one.
Yes, I think that is a very important point to mention, because we have moved from, so I'm a millennial. Not going to give my age, but I'm
an
millennial.
elder millennial myself, yes.
There we go. And I grew up in the era of, the startup internet, that stuff, and grew with that. So, and then we started with the mass media, right? So we grew up with mass media and the start of the internet. But at that point, internet was not personal. It was, mass media was made for everyone, and that worked. And over the years, as the internet evolved, it became more personal. So if you don't understand who you are talking to, there are millions of mediums and millions of companies out there that will talk to the person that you are trying to reach, if you don't know who you are. Also, as a brand, you cannot function if you don't know what you stand for and who you are. So it's like sitting on the fence, Switzerland. It's boring. It's not memorable. I'm going to walk past you and I'm not going to look twice.
Yeah. Okay, Sharita, let's get into specifics. Let's make this really actionable and practical for everyone. Maybe let's take like an imaginary radio station, right? We're going to call it Pulse 96.7. Okay, it's brand new. It's got no identity yet. It's just starting out on the airwaves. If we had to shape an identity for this radio station, an organizational identity, where would we even start? What elements would we need to consider first and foremost?
Well, if you want to start an identity, you need to know who it is that you want as a consumer. So, what is your product? And who do you want to bring in with this product? So, if it's a new radio station, obviously you need to have a look, you need to do research because you need to understand the needs of your audience. You need to understand their primary demographics, the age group that you want to target. So if we get back to what you said about you can't be everything to everyone, because if you do, you end up being nothing to no one. It's the same with just looking at age, not even delving further for now. I can't have a radio station. Well, I'm sure I can. I'm just not going to have listeners. But anyway, that caters for people from 16 to 80, because the content that 16-year-olds talk about is not the same content that 80-year-olds will be talking about. So demographics, very important. Gender needs to be taken into consideration, but that's if you go past the first phase. You need to look at the kind of people that you are talking to from an income bracket. Once again, because things that are important, and now I'm going to say a word that a lot of people won't understand, LSM, or SEM as we are moving towards now. So listener survey measurement or socioeconomic measure. If you are living in this rural little shack, there are certain things that you are fighting for on a day-to-day level versus someone who lives in a mansion and drives a Porsche, for instance. So again, different types of content. Big thing, where are you located? Who are you talking to? Are you a local radio station, a community radio station, or are you a massive South African radio station needing to take into consideration all listeners? Then are you talking to people who have some sort of an education, or don't they? And then also part of the LSM/SEM, are they someone who is already working or not? And then there is that shift, like between Gen Zs and millennials, and what they want in terms of security and where they can work, etc., etc. So that's just the starting point. And then from there, you delve into the things that social media has been very good at, which is telling me more about who you are as a person, your interests, your lifestyles, your values, your day-to-day needs. What is it that you want? What are you striving for? Things like that. So the first point, just bringing it all back again, is figuring out who you are targeting. So who you are targeting, why you are targeting them. Because if you don't understand why you're targeting them, they're not going to understand it. And then you need to understand your values, because through values, you create your brand, which is how you and I connect at the end of the day.
Because really, if you start to understand who exactly is tuning in, that's going to shape everything you do as a radio station, right? What music you play, what kind of news you run, what ads you serve up, all of these things all feed into this key idea of who is your target market. I want to drill a little deeper into this, Shreet, and ask you about something we hear all the time, maybe don't always get, is this difference between demographics and psychographics. Can you explain that difference a bit here, how that plays into crafting this organizational identity?
So demographics are important, but it's more from a mass media point of view, I would say, because that's my primary information that I need. So it's literally the baseline. So my demographics would literally be like my age, my gender, my income, my education, my occupation. Okay, so that's my starting point. Great. But I can't now assume that because I know this, and I have 10 people in front of me who have all of these in common, that they will still listen to, or that they will have the same interests, for instance, okay? That they will all like to go out and party or all love animals, etc. So that's where psychographics come in more. So it's literally breaking down, telling me more about you from a personality point of view, from a psyche point of view, if you want. So your lifestyle, are you someone who sits in front of a computer the whole day? Are you someone who loves jogging in the morning? Are you someone who loves spending time on your own? Do you love going out with friends, like being in a group, okay? Introverted, extroverted, that kind of stuff. Or do you care about the environment or not? What do you find important from a value perspective? What do you value? Do you value family? Do you value a work-life balance? Do you value your children? Do you value your job, etc.? There's a lot of things, obviously, millions of stuff that you can put in there. So it all depends on who you are as a person then. And then from there, if you think about it, the next thing would kind of be, what do you need? Like, what are your day-to-day needs for you to be fulfilled? Like, are there certain things that you want that you're doing? Is honesty important for you? Are you struggling with things like boredom or loneliness? Why is it like that you would listen to, let's say, this radio station? Do you have a need for laughing? Do you have a need for inspirational content, right? Or do you like learning new things or not? So psychographics is literally like, if you break down social media, if you and I open our social media accounts, let's say our Instagram or TikTok accounts, because we know Facebook is like for older people. We have the same account, or we both have an account, but the content on said accounts are completely different because we have different interests at the end of the day. So there are different types of stories that will pop up for us, right, in these different areas of our lives. We have different types of personalities. I think a good example there is humor, just humor, okay? Everyone loves humor, but what does humor mean? What humor means for you and for me is not the same thing. I, for instance, don't like slapstick comedy. Other people love it. Some people love dark comedy. Some people love satires. Like, so there's a lot of different ways you can take this in, or sarcastic humor. And that's just taking one emotion, just taking humor, and breaking it down into all these different ways that you can find it. So this gives you the idea that people are a lot deeper than we think on the surface. But also from that, with that kind of a thing, keeping that in mind, another thing that is quite important to realize and to remember is, again, with today's Gen Zs, and I'm pretty sure Gen Alphas will probably be leaning towards that way, we all want the sense of community. We want to form part of a community, right? It's just in us. It's part of who we are as human beings to survive. But I also want to be seen and known as an individual. So not only do you need to bring me into a community, you need to talk to me like I am one person, not like I'm a generic human being whose face you can't see at all.
Yeah. And I mean, absolutely, what we're really talking about here is how do we connect emotionally with listeners or with customers if we're talking outside of the radio business? How do we bring people closer into that community, make them feel like they're a part of that community, but then also respect them and connect with them on a one-to-one basis so that they feel like we're talking to them instead of at them? And here I want to bring in another element that I think is really crucial to highlight here. And this is this idea of consistency. Any discussion about brand identity, organizational identity has to be underpinned by consistency, right? So if you're thinking about running a project or launching a radio station, or even if you're thinking about your personal brand, you've got to think about being consistent. But talk to us about about what that means, especially in our multi-platform world. I mean, we've got social media, we've got events, we've got in-person, we've got all sorts of things going on. How do we stay consistent, and why is it important?
You stay consistent with hard work. at the end of the day. So consistency, we see something great. It goes out of our mind because we have so much information that we're taking in, right? So we are overloaded with information, we're time poor. So for me to, even if it's the best story, for me to actually take in all the details, I need to hear or see or feel this thing more than once. So if you start being consistent and consistently telling me your brand's logo, or consistently posting about feel-good stories or whatever it is, there's a point where I start remembering what it is that you are doing. Okay. And it's at that point where we start forming this habit of looking out for your content, listening to your content, finding it, or as a company, if you are consistently delivering good products to me, there comes a point where I start trusting you, even if no one else has told me that your product is great. If you're consistently doing it, you start becoming top of mind for me. So we call it top of mind awareness, which is really important because you can't, from an advertising perspective, for instance, advertise something in one burst and then expect everyone will know what it is for the next 2 years. Okay. You have to be consistent, especially like you said, multi-platform consistency. Everyone is not on one platform. You need to make sure today there's absolutely no excuse not to make use of all the different platforms out there. Okay. So you have to remember once again to the different nuances on the different platforms, but you consistently have to put something out. So if you're putting it on the radio, then you take it to social media. Then perhaps you make a podcast out of it, or you cut the snippet of it. Maybe you put it on a billboard, or you make a digital billboard, or you create an event. Okay, it's just about keeping that ball rolling so that people remain aware of you and aware of the fact that you are there. I might not want to use your product right now, might not have a need for it right now, but if there is a point where I want this product, your product is going to come up first in my mind. Okay, so it's really important for us, this traction, if you will. So a station identity is super important, along with being consistent with the station identity. I often have people ask me, why do we hear which radio station we are listening to so much? And you'd be surprised how many presenters have no idea why they keep saying the station identity or their names or the show's name. And this forms in completely with this, well, obviously consistency, but also just with the traction and the awareness, like having people being aware of who you are. Because yeah, it's so important for us from a, not just a retention point of view, but for research. Because if we start doing research about who is listening to my, let's say, radio station in this case, people don't remember what they had for lunch last week, right? There's no way I'm going to be able to tell you exactly who I listen to. But if you have been more top of mind and you've consistently been driving your message through and through and through, eventually I will remember you. Okay. So it's like those annoying people that just don't want to leave you alone. They just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And eventually you just give in because you're getting so annoyed. You're like, okay, let me just give you what you want at this point. So the problem also is that mass media doesn't allow us for that fragmentation. So it's really important that you have to be consistent on all the different platforms if you still want to reach a bigger target audience, especially keeping in mind, like we're saying, how busy people are and where they are at different times of the day.
Shrita, I've got one quick last question for you. I think I know the answer here, but I'm going to ask it anyway. For anyone here who is wanting to build a really formidable brand, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them about crafting this organizational identity, a really strong organizational identity that can really connect with people?
So consistency is absolutely important, but building your brand, you need to know who you are, who you want to talk to first and foremost before you even try and look anywhere else. You have to have your SWOT analysis in place. You need to know what your own strengths and weaknesses are, what your own value system is, what you want, or what the needs are of your target market consumer before you can even start working on a brand. So what I find a lot is people start businesses, but they don't have a complete faith in who they want to be, and they're trying to be everything to everyone, which means they end up being nothing to no one. So rather have one extremely loyal, trustworthy consumer than have 100 people out there who kind of have an idea of what you do, but they will never buy into you because they don't buy into your brand. Because if your values coincide with my values, then there's trust, and then I will start buying into who you are. But really important here is to remember it takes a long time, a lot of consistency in doing the same thing well over and over and over again. It takes one thing to break that brand down, because a brand is a promise. So I'm promising you to be good always. And if one day I come to you and I'm not like that, you can lose people in a second, which is why it's so important that you know who your identity is, that well-defined identity and honesty, transparency, hard work, and consistency. I know who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Always, always, always. And as you say, know who you're talking to. Remember, in business, it's not about you, it's about them. So, Sharita, thank you so much, as always, for sharing these fabulous insights with us. It's been a super, super interesting discussion. And everyone, I hope you actually have a much clearer picture now of what it takes to build an identity that doesn't just stand out, but that actually means something to the audience, to the client, to the customer. And I love this idea that identity isn't just about logos and taglines. It is about connecting with people on a deeper level. It's about having had a one-on-one conversation with your client that makes them actually feel seen and heard. So everyone, catch you later on Study Sesh for more insights, hoping to bridge the gap between theory and the real world. See you soon.